I just want to ask you guys one question. What did the Warriors run tonight offensively? Did they run a bunch of motion the way they did the last game against the Timberwolves? Or did they run a bunch of high pick and rolls against Rudy Gobert and found a ton of easy opportunities in this game? I don't know why this is so difficult for Steve Kerr to realize this. I don't know why it's so difficult for Steph Curry to realize this. I don't know why it's so difficult for this entire team to collectively realize that the game is comically easier when they include a blend of pick and rolls, especially against the other team's bigs. They can do this literally against every center in the league. Think about Rudy Gobert is one of the best defenders in the league. One of the reasons why he gets exposed come playoffs or against better teams is because they start to expose him in those high screen actions where other teams don't have a Steph Curry. So what they'll do is they'll stick Rudy Gobert on switches and force him to guard somebody from out in the perimeter. And he's obviously nowhere near the defender that he is from out in the 30-foot area compared to inside the paint area where he's most effective. So if he's most effective in that paint area, well, then wouldn't it make most sense to make him vulnerable and get him out to where he's not comfortable? Look, ultimately, Steph Curry is the greatest basketball player on the planet when he's allowed to be more free and make the game easier for the rest of his teammates. If he gets trapped out of a high pick and roll situation, all he has to do is find the cutter and it's deuces. That guy is getting a dunk. Whether that guy's name is GP2, Trayce Jackson-Davis, Kevon Looney, it doesn't matter. The guy is wide open. And should there be a tagger, at the end of the day, the other team is stuck playing 4-on-3. So then there will be a cutter and there's going to be an open dunk, even if Steph Curry doesn't end up getting the assist. Which, as you know, when Draymond is the roller, that's what usually ends up happening. The cornerman cuts through, Draymond attacks and throws up a lob and it's a dunk. You have to be mentally challenged to say, oh, well, that action is amazing and it's an easy bucket for the Warriors almost every time, but I don't want to run that because it's just not aesthetically pleasing. Not everybody gets to touch the ball in that situation, and I don't like that. So I'm just going to have everybody throw the ball around for the first 15 seconds of an offense to ultimately burp up a really difficult contested shot with the defense knowing exactly what you're going to do. The other team's center gets to chill and relax in the paint area without having to worry about being exposed in any kind of way. And that's why when the Warriors play a team like the Clippers and they don't utilize this against a lumbering, slow-footed guy like Zubac, the cells in my blood boils in anger because it is a criminal misuse of the greatest offensive weapon the NBA has ever seen. And Steve Kerr perpetually does it. He did it the game before against the Timberwolves. And well, you saw my rant and what I had to say about Steve Kerr the criminal after watching that complete and utter nonsense, especially after what they were able to do against the Rockets utilizing that very same pick and roll action. Steph Curry, stuck in perpetual hell of Steve Kerr's motion offense, usually gets outplayed by most other stars in the league and makes him look like a shell of himself, and it allows people to have this narrative that, oh, he's too old and he can't do this anymore and he needs a number 2 option and he needs this and that and he needs to come off the bench and he's slowing down, blah blah blah. Creates all the false narratives that you can think of. But when he's allowed to put his imprints into the game, make the game comically easy for his teammates and for himself as he's on the ball more and just more in rhythm in general, well, then he's the best basketball player on the planet. He already proved that against the Thunder and the Celtics earlier this season when they were playing that kind of offense where there's just a blend of actions, some ISOs, a bunch of pick and roll actions, and then some DHOs, and then some relocations. So blending in all of these abilities makes Steph Curry the most unstoppable force that has ever stepped foot on an NBA basketball court. Not even Michael Jordan could generate the level of fear that other teams feel when Steph Curry crosses over the half-court line. Because Michael Jordan wasn't such a threat from the three-point line, no center had to ever get out all the way there. They could always drop when it comes to a Michael Jordan offense. You can never drop against Steph Curry on a high screen action because then he's going to be wide open and you're going to leave Steph Curry wide open from the three-point line because your center wants to drop. Well, you're dead. And so when you understand these things, and then you see Steve Kerr run this garbage motion offense to the ground, and Steph Curry basically never gets into a rhythm, and then the Warriors are in trouble in the fourth quarter, and then suddenly you give him the ball, abandon your motion offense, and expect him to come through. That's not how the game of basketball works. If you want him to play that way, you have to play that way from the get-go and make sure that he's constantly in rhythm quarter by quarter. Every superstar that has ever existed in the NBA has been used in that manner, except for Steph Curry. And somehow Steve Kerr stands, and the people who want to defend him always find a way to come up with insane excuses like, oh, well, playing a bunch of pick and roll is going to be very taxing and tiring for Steph Curry's legs. So let me get this straight. When Steph Curry gets trapped coming off a screen where he ends up taking maybe 2 to 3 dribbles and then stops and then makes a pass to a cutter, is somehow tiring for his legs. But in the motion when he's doing a gazillion miles, getting grabbed, top locked, scratched up, all these things, that's not taxing? It's incredible. The most senseless logic these people use to justify how Steph Curry has been misused all these years. Every single time they utilize plenty of pick and rolls with Steph Curry and give him the ball more, the Warriors are unstoppable. Even on a night where there are total fundamental flaws once again, the offense is so potent, they're able to come away with a win. And because they're having an easier time scoring, it alleviates the pressure of feeling like they have to get a stop every single time in crunch time. When you alleviate that offensive pressure, it makes it easier to play better defense, knowing that your offense is gonna be there. So now you just have to make sure that you become as strong as possible on the defensive end of the floor. The offense and the defense is interconnected in that way. The emotions and the feelings of momentum on your side changes the energy level when you play, and the feeling of vulnerability goes away. When you have that vulnerable feeling is when the Warriors fall apart. And it most often happens when they're running the motion to the ground, because the motion is a basic systemic action that every NBA team knows. And if you're going to run that to close a game, well, most NBA teams are going to be able to shut that down, because that offense oftentimes fails to maximize the abilities of its best player, that being Steph Curry. Now, having said that, the small lineup of Draymond at center and Jonathan Kuminga at power forward is non-viable for a lot of different reasons. Number one, you're going to do that for the rest of the season. Good luck keeping Draymond healthy. His back is going to start flaring up. You got to understand that NBA centers are giants, and it's really difficult to deal with that all day if you're Draymond Green, who is 35 years old, 6'6", 235 pounds, often dealing with guys that are 20, 30, sometimes even 40 plus pounds heavier than him. It takes a physical toll, and you have to respect that aspect of the game. And Steve just doesn't seem to care about that aspect of the game. And that's going to wear on these players, especially if you're going to permanently put those guys in these positions. You're simply asking too much of Draymond from a defensive standpoint, and it will wear him out. So I'm concerned about that. We'll see how long this lineup goes on for. Obviously, Kuminga started once again at the 4. And another thing I'll say about that combination, Draymond and Kuminga, long term, that is just not a viable closing lineup unless, again, Steve Kerr regularly closes games using a lot of pick and rolls after having run a bunch of it throughout the course of the game, rather than running the motion the whole time and then suddenly expecting the team to turn to the pick and roll and run it crisply. You have to do it throughout the course of the game to see what works, which ones may be more limited, and get a really good feel. Each and every single game is different, because each and every single game you're playing new players with new skill sets, new defenders with all kinds of different capabilities, all this stuff. So if that's what Steve's gonna do, and I doubt it, because the guy has said in the past that he would resign before he turns to a consistent offense where a bunch of pick and rolls are run. So whenever we have these amazing games where the Warriors just absolutely dominate running a bunch of pick and rolls, understand that under Steve Kerr, it's always going to be a mirage. Watch, next game, they are going to revert. If not next game, the game after that. The guy always reverts because he hates the freaking pick and roll, man. It's one of his many criminalities as the coach of this team. And I told you in the last video, right? If they ran a bunch of pick and rolls against Rudy Gobert, they're going to have a really good chance of beating this team. If they don't do that, it's almost a guaranteed L. So yes, if they run a bunch of pick and rolls for a chunk of the game, and then they run these smaller lineups, then they may have better odds of winning because their offense is so potent. And again, it gives them more energy from a defensive standpoint. When your offense is not going, your defense is going to look that much worse. So we'll see if they ultimately decided, okay, if in order for us to play this smaller style and do it consistently, we're gonna have to run a different kind of offense. And look at Steph Curry, man. 30 points and 8 assists tonight. This is the kind of stuff that he can do on a regular basis, and it's really not that hard for him. Steph Curry is one of the most conditioned superstars we've ever seen in NBA history. And they use the excuse of, oh, we're going to run him out if he's on the ball more. They said it this season. They said it last season. They said it the season before that. They've been saying this and using this as some kind of excuse for years and years and years. No other superstar has been treated with this kind of disrespect and kid gloves. A lot of you will not know this, but if you're on Twitter, you will certainly know this. Steve Kerr so seldomly uses the pick and roll, and I have been advocating it for so long that 2 years ago in the playoffs when the Warriors were facing the Kings in a Game 7 situation and Steph Curry suddenly got on the ball and proceeded to score 50 points to get the Warriors over the hump in the first round against the Kings, my name was trending on Twitter. And it wasn't just my name trending on Twitter. The specific words that were trending on Twitter were Gym Park offense. They called a basic pick and roll action and the ball in Steph Curry's hands, they called it the Gym Park offense because that's what I always advocate for, and that's something that Steve Kerr just actively refuses to do. And because Steph Curry went off in a crucial playoff game doing that method, they didn't call it the Steve Kerr offense, they called it the Gym Park offense. That is no lie. And when they run the Gym Park offense consistently, the Warriors are the best basketball team on the planet. And they haven't been for the last 3 years. And that, again, is what has made my blood boil all these years. Now getting to some quick pointers about this game, Steve Kerr ran a 10-man rotation, which is a good thing. But once again, part of that has to do with the fact that Andrew Wiggins simply wasn't available. Not only that, there were 3 guys off the bench that played 20 plus minutes. And 2 guys in the single minutes. Moses Moody played 5 minutes in this game, and Slo-Mo played 8 minutes in this game. I assure you, these are mistakes that Steve Kerr is making. The bigger the Warriors are, the better their defense is going to be. How you can justify playing Lindy Waters for 22 minutes and Slo-Mo for 8 minutes? My mind is just freaking blown, man. Lindy Waters is a two-way player, and Slo-Mo they signed as a key rotational piece off their bench, and this is how they're using him. Quite foul. And also, the Draymond-Kuminga combination as a power forward center tandem should never be used if Steph Curry's not on the floor. That is a recipe for disaster. And actually, in the fourth quarter, that's exactly what happened. Steph Curry and Slo-Mo took a seat early in the fourth with over 9 minutes remaining. And while they sat and Steve Kerr ran JK and Dre at the power forward center as a combination, the Timberwolves proceeded to go on a 15-3 run and took back all the momentum that the Warriors had built up the entire game. Sabotaging stuff. Nasty work. Steph Curry got back into the picture. He was in rhythm because he was in rhythm throughout the course of the game. Was poised and under control. And obviously Buddy Hield started this game and finally had a monster game, 27 points on 18 shots. And again, the offense just looked very different and simplified. And also when you run those pick and roll actions, well, a guy like Buddy Hield is going to find a lot more open opportunities as a standstill shooter. And if he's getting standstill shots, oh, he's gonna make them. It's the motion where he has to come off curls and take a bunch of these really difficult shots with a recovering defense is where he can't be as consistent as he should be. And Jonathan Kuminga, for a chunk of the game, from an offensive standpoint, he was struggling. But he came to life in the second half and played really well on both ends of the floor, particularly against Julius Randle, who was just playing an awful game. But Kuminga played him really tough. This was one of the toughest performances I've ever seen from him at the power forward spot. And again, the level of his effectiveness is going to come down to how Steve Kerr utilizes his abilities and talents and make sure that you run stuff that is advantageous for him rather than just a system and the need for him to just fit into that system. And if they can consistently do that, then he'll be able to perform more consistently. I just don't believe that that's what Steve Kerr is going to do at all. I believe that tonight's game was an aberration. I believe that Anthony Edwards talked some smack in the previous win. And I think whenever you do that against Steph Curry, he will take it personally and that will come back to bite you. But it's insane how both he and Steve Kerr are selective about when to use the pick and roll on any given game. It should be used every single game because it is an unprecedented advantage against the other team, and it completely breaks the fabric of their defense because the center is always the other team's anchor, and if you're breaking their anchor by forcing him out to the three-point line, well, their defense is broken. Fantastic game from Kevon Looney as well, by the way. He got 21 minutes tonight, and to be honest with you, he should have closed this game. The game would simply be easier for the Warriors if their defense is stacked rather than going way too small, making it vulnerable, making it easier for the other team to get into the paint, grab rebounds, because the Warriors have nobody taller than 6'7" on the floor in Kuminga, who is not a great rebounder on most nights. Last thing I'll say is that Trayce Jackson-Davis has been taken out of the rotation. I don't know if it's permanent, but if so, it would be highly unfortunate because yeah, he misses some layups. Yeah, he's lost touch because he has no rhythm. And of course, when they're running a whole bunch of pick and rolls, he's nowhere to be found in rotation. It's the action where he's most unstoppable. And of course, they use a bunch of it when he's out of the rotation. Gee freaking whiz, man. At the end of the day, you can't be more concerned about a couple of missed layups, which is like 2-3 possessions, versus the 20 to 25 possessions where he makes a massive impact from a defensive standpoint. And I understand that he's been less forceful from a defensive standpoint as well, compared to last season anyway. So this is really on Trayce. I don't know if anybody has ever told him that he's on our roster trying to contend for a title, and he's been a major piece to that. So you have to come out with gung-ho energy. You have to come out with enforcer energy. You have to put a body on everybody and let everybody on the other team know, good luck trying to score on me when I am the anchor of this team. That's the kind of attitude and mindset that you have to have if you're a center playing for this team. Looney has that, and Trayce still needs to learn what it means to play with that kind of mentality. I don't know if anybody in that coaching staff is conveying this level of message to him because he hasn't played with that caliber of energy. Now, I don't think what's happened to him is fair. I don't think they've used him correctly at all from an offensive standpoint. They don't involve him at all in any pick and rolls because Steve Kerr hates him. But from an energy standpoint, you still have to overcome that. I mean, it is what it is. You know, if you look at his box plus minus, which is a major indicator for your overall value for this team, he's in the top 5. If you look at the top 5 for box plus minus for this team, every single one of them is a defender. And he has one of the highest plus minuses in the fourth quarter for this team, believe it or not. Trayce has always been a more impactful player in the second half of games than in the first half of games. You can say that about Steph Curry too, by the way. He's much more forceful in the second half than he is in most first halves, isn't he? So long term, they're going to need Trayce, and they're going to need him to come around. If he's going to be out of the rotation for the foreseeable future, I think that is a detriment to this team. But if they are going to do that, they should just send him to the G League so he can pick up some confidence. You got to develop him. You can't just let him rot on the bench and just give up on him after 20 freaking games. Even with those struggles, I literally just told you about his plus minus and his overall impact. Big shout out to GP2, who was a monster in that fourth quarter, shutting down both Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards. This is the kind of impact that GP2 can have, especially when the Warriors are energized on both ends of the floor. And he's another player that a lot of Warriors fans are constantly shitting on for no good reason. I will always support the biggest dogs and the most important defenders on this team, no matter how much they struggle from an offensive standpoint. That's why I never overly get at Kevon Looney, because he is an enforcer from a defensive standpoint. Again, for the next game, we will see if this was a trend in terms of what offense they play, or another aberration, fool's gold, a lie, an exception. Unfortunately, I'm going to bet that it's going to be the latter because I know exactly who Steve Kerr is at the end of the day. We'll see. So here they are, yo-yoing back between wins and losses, and just constantly in a state of complete garbage or complete greatness, and thereby stuck in perpetual mediocrity. The reason I want Steve Kerr out of here is because I am sick and tired of these inconsistencies in terms of what the team decides to run. I think if he's out of there and the team consistently plays the way they did tonight, they'd be the best team in the league. Went from all these narratives of the Warriors have nothing on their team and they need to just blow it up, they need to do a trade right away, nobody is useful on this team, to suddenly Steph Curry being re-energized, revitalized, Kuminga looking like a two-way force, even Buddy Hield waking up from the abyss. Things just look completely different. That's all I got for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, especially so you can get the most elite content when it comes to the Warriors on the planet. Until next time.